Brethren, welcome to Shabbat services, and today we are going to start in earnest our 10-part study series, or the 11-part study series on the Ten Commandments. If you recall, last week we had a look at the commandments and the law. We discerned between what were the commandments of Yehovah, what was the Mosaic law, and what is applicable to us today and what is not applicable. So now we're going into the first of these commandments. So let's start by turning to the book of Exodus, and let us start in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 1. And the Mighty One spoke all these words, saying, I am Yehovah your Mighty One, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them. For I, Yehovah your Mighty One, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of Yehovah your Mighty One in vain, for Yehovah will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it set apart. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yehovah your Mighty One. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days Jehovah made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore Jehovah blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart. Honour your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which Jehovah your Mighty One is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbour. You shall not covet your neighbour's house. You shall not covet your neighbour's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbour's. So that is the 10 Commandments as given to us in the book of Exodus. And let us start this week by looking at the First Commandment, and this is found in verses 1 to 3. The First Commandment reads as follows. And the Mighty One spake all these words, saying, I am Yehovah, your Mighty One, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. So over this study we're going to break that commandment down, and we'll look in turn at what it means at each step. But there was one thing I want to do just to set the structure, because we didn't cover it last week, and I think it's an important concept to understand. So just before we go into the detailed breakdown, I just want to bring you to one more scripture so that you can understand the structure of the commandments and how they're put together. So please turn forward with me to Matthew 22, and we'll start in verse 34. Matthew 22, starting in verse 34. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer, asking him a question, testing him, and saying, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Yehoshua said to him, You shall love Yehovah your Mighty One, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbour as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So here Yehoshua is giving us the structure of the commandments. He says the first great commandment is You shall love Yehovah your Mighty One with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This obviously is the Shema. It comes from Deuteronomy. And then he says the second is like it. You shall love your neighbour as yourself. And this gives us an understanding as to the structure of the commandments. Because it says, on these two commandments hang the law and the prophets. So the commandments are set up in a specific way. They give us two pieces of information. The first is our relationship with Yehovah. So the first part of the commandments and the first four commandments actually define our relationship with Yehovah. The fifth commandment is a transitional statement. Now, the fifth commandment is honor your father and your mother. So that can be read as how we have a relationship with Yehovah, Yehovah being our father and Israel being our mother, or with our earthly parents. So the fifth commandment is a transitional commandment between or from the relationship with Yehovah to our relationship with other human beings. In this scripture it says, you shall love thy neighbour as thyself. And then commandments 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 define our relationship with other human beings. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not steal, you shall not covet. And the 10th commandment is in itself a transitional commandment. The first 9 commandments are physical behaviours. They are the physical acts that we do. The 10th commandment is the way we think. Covetousness is in our heart and mind, whereas all the other commandments are the physical acts that we do. So the 10th commandment is in itself a transitional commandment, because that leads into what Yehoshua did when he fulfilled the law. And if you remember last week, we discussed how Yehoshua brought the commandments into our hearts. He brought them from being an external requirement to an internal requirement. So the 10th commandment is a transitional commandment from the external requirement of the first covenant to the internal, to the spiritual requirement of the renewed covenant. And this graphic here gives us an oversight of how these commandments are brought together. So on the one side, 1, 2, 3, 4 is our love of Yehovah. 5 is a transitional commandment. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is how we love our neighbour. And 10 is a transitional commandment. And supporting the commandments, we have what's called the mitzvot. The rules, the regulations, the Mosaic law, the statutes, the judgment. These all support the commandments. And you'll see this principle come out as we go through this study. And before we move, there's one other thing I want to do. Again, this is one of probably the most misquoted verse in Scripture. You see where it says, love thy neighbour, or love the neighbour. The Scripture actually says, love thy neighbour as thyself. And if you cannot love yourself, then you cannot fulfill the law and love your neighbour. So the first step in the process of becoming a true child of Yehovah is to forgive yourself, to love yourself, to let go of your own past, to let go of your own issues. So when you can have that healthy, effective relationship with yourself, when you bring Yehovah into your life, then you can truly love your neighbour. But if you can't love yourself, there is no way you can truly love your neighbour. So that's something that we need to take away from this. So that was aside. So now let's go back and let's break down this commandment in detail, line by line, and understand what Yehovah is telling us here. So please turn back to Exodus chapter 6, and we'll start in verse 1. Exodus chapter 6, starting in verse 1. Then Yehovah said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he will let them go, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of his land. And the Mighty One spoke to Moses and said to him, I am Yehovah. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, as the Mighty One, Almighty. But by my name Yehovah I was not known to them. They have also established my covenant with them, to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their pilgrimage, in which they were strangers. And I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians kept in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore say to the children of Israel, I am Yehovah, I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rescue you from their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. I will take you as my people, and I will be your mighty one. Then you shall know that I am YHWH your mighty one, who brings you out from under the burden of the Egyptians. And I will bring you into the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a heritage. I am YHWH. So Moses spoke thus to the children of Israel, but they did not heed Moses, because of an anguish of spirit and cruel bondage. So, what does it say? In verse 7 it tells us this: And I will take you to me for a people, and I will be to you a mighty one. And ye shall know that I am YHWH, your mighty one, which bringeth you out from under the burden of the Egyptians. And here we see the first sign of this covenant, the covenantal relationship. One of the things we need to understand is the relationship between man and YHWH is always covenantal. We have a covenant with him. He has a covenant with us. And the covenant typically goes, if you do this, I will do that. If you do the other, I will do something else. It's always a choice. The way YHWH reacts to us is based on the way we choose to react to him. And here we see this principle in play. I will take you to me for a people, and I will be to you a mighty one. So here we see that two-way relationship. YHWH will be our mighty one, and in return we will be his people. The children of Israel are the people of YHWH. And it then says, And you shall know that I am YHWH your mighty one, which bringeth you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. So part of this relationship, just as YHWH tells us we shall have no other mighty ones before him, he will have no other people before us. We are his chosen people. We are the ones with whom he first made the covenantal relationship. And as I said, this is a two-way street. He will be our mighty one, and we will be his people. And that's how this first commandment gets started. That's how it's structured. And so let's see what is the blessing, what is the benefit of being his people. Let's turn forward to Leviticus 19, and we'll start in verse 1. Leviticus 19, starting in verse 1. And YHWH spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, You shall be set apart, for I, YHWH, your mighty one, am set apart. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am YHWH your mighty one. Do not turn to idols, nor make for yourselves moulded gods. I am YHWH your mighty one. And if you offer a sacrifice of peace offering to YHWH, you shall offer it of your own free will. It shall be eaten the same day you offer it, and on the next day. And if any remains until the third day, it shall be burned in the fire. And if it is eaten at all on the third day, it is an abomination. It shall not be accepted. Therefore everyone who eats it shall bear his iniquity, because he has profaned the hallowed offering of YHWH, and that person shall be cut off from his people. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest, and you shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather every grape of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am YHWH your mighty one. You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. And you shall not swear by my name falsely, nor shall you profane the name of your mighty one. I am YHWH. You shall not cheat your neighbour, nor rob him. The wages of him who is hired shall not remain with you all night until morning. You shall not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind, but shall fear your mighty one. I am YHWH. You shall do no injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor honour the person of the mighty. In righteousness you shall judge your neighbour. You shall not go about as a talebearer among your people. You shall not take a stand against the life of your neighbour. I am YHWH. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your neighbour, and not bear sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbour as yourself. I am YHWH. You shall keep my statutes. You shall not let your livestock breed with another kind. You shall not sow your field with mixed seed, nor shall a garment of mixed linen and wool come upon you. Whoever lies carnally with a woman who is betrothed to a man as a concubine, and who has not at all been redeemed nor given her freedom, for this then shall be scourging. But they shall not be put to death, because she was not free. And he shall bring his trespass offering to YHWH to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, a ram as a trespass offering. The priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the trespass offering before YHWH for his sin which he has committed, and the sin which he has committed shall be forgiven him. When you come into the land and have planted all kinds of trees for food, then you shall count the fruit as uncircumcised. 3 years it shall be as uncircumcised to you, it shall not be eaten. But in the 4th year all its fruit shall be set apart, a praise to YHWH. And in the 5th year you may eat its fruit, that it may yield to you its increase. I am YHWH your mighty one. You shall not eat anything with the blood, nor shall you practice divination or soothsaying. You shall not shave around the sides of your head, nor shall you disfigure the edges of your beard. You shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor tattoo any marks on you. I am YHWH. Do not prostitute your daughter, to cause her to be a harlot, lest the land fall into harlotry, and the land become full of wickedness. You shall keep my Sabbaths, and reverence my sanctuary. I am YHWH. Give no regard to mediums and familiar spirits. Do not seek after them to be defiled by them. I am YHWH your mighty one. You shall rise before the grey-headed, and honour the presence of an old man, and fear your mighty one. I am YHWH. And if a stranger dwells with you in your land, you shall not mistreat him. The stranger who dwells among you shall be to you as one born among you. And you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am YHWH your mighty one. You shall do no injustice in judgment, in measurement of length, weight, or volume. You shall have honest scales, honest weights, and an honest ephah, and an honest hin. I am YHWH your mighty one, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe all my statutes and my judgments, and perform them. I am YHWH. So in that chapter of Leviticus, we saw how the 10 Commandments forms the structure of the relationship between YHWH and his people, and also how he expanded the 10 Commandments with the statutes and the judgments. So Leviticus 19 starts to expand on the commandments. For example, we're told, thou shalt not steal, and in here we're told, you shall not steal, you shall not cheat, you shall not hold back a labourer's wages, you shall not have dishonest scales, you shall not have dishonest measures. So we can see how YHWH is expanding. These all come under the concept of the commandment, thou shalt not steal, but they are all expansions, they are clarifications on how we should apply that commandment in our life. And we are required to obey the commandments for a very clear purpose. In verse 2 it tells us this: Speak unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say to them, Ye shall be set apart, for I, YHWH your mighty one, am set apart. So here we see this two-way relationship. YHWH is set apart. YHWH is separate from sin. He's separate from the carnal nature. He is our mighty one, and as we are his people, he requires us to be set apart. He requires us to separate ourselves from the sins of the world, from the cares of the world. And so we see in this relationship, if he is our mighty one and we are his people, we are to follow his instructions, and we are to live a life which is set apart. We are to choose the way of YHWH and not the way of the world. And there's another point I wanted to raise here, because it's often often misunderstood. YHWH did not give us any new commandments. He did not give us any new laws. All he did was teach us how to properly apply the laws that were given. And as I mentioned before, probably the most misquoted verse in the Bible, the most misunderstood of the instructions, thou shalt love thy neighbour, is obviously correctly attributed and correctly quoted to love thy neighbour as thyself. Now that is attributed to YHWH, but if you look in verse 18, here YHWH prescribes us in the Old Testament. Verse 18 says this, thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. I am YHWH. So here we see that the ministry that YHWH had was to expand, was to expound, was to clarify and fulfill the teaching of Torah. It was in no way, shape or form to abrogate it, or to change it, or to modify it, or to nail it to the stake. YHWH was here to help us truly understand, apply and internalize the teachings of Torah. And there is nothing in YHWH's teaching that has not already been given to us by YHWH. Now the other thing, people say, well, you're being exclusivist. You're saying you are the chosen people, that means everybody else isn't good enough. That again is a misunderstanding. That's not what YHWH said. YHWH chose the children of Israel. He expected the children of Israel to do their part, to fulfill their part in the covenant. He said, I am YHWH, your mighty one. You are my chosen people. But that was not an exclusivist statement. Yes, to be a child of YHWH is to be in a very exclusive relationship, but our attitude is one of inclusion. If you look in verse 34, it says this, but the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself. For ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am YHWH, your mighty one. So, to be a child of YHWH is to be in a very, very exclusive position. There are very few people throughout the history of humankind who can claim that they have become the children of YHWH. His first attempt to form this bond, to form this relationship, was with the physical tribes of Israel. They rejected him, and therefore he divorced Israel and he punished Judah. But anyone who chooses to enter into Israel, the stranger who chooses to come into a relationship with YHWH through the tribe of Israel, is treated as one born among us. So the relationship with YHWH is exclusive, but our attitude to those who want to come into him is inclusive. And this is where we see the Jews today are not fulfilling this piece of Torah. They claim to be the chosen people. They claim this exclusive relationship, but then they take it too far and they exclude others from coming in, to having the opportunity to come in. And this is exactly what YHWH's ministry was. He says, I have rejected you, and now I will offer this to the Gentiles. So anybody who chooses to follow the teachings of YHWH is considered to be a child of YHWH, and as if they were born into the tribes of Israel. So it is an exclusive relationship, but our attitude is inclusive. So let's just look at how important this relationship is to YHWH. Let's turn to Ezekiel chapter 20, and let us look how important this relationship is to YHWH himself. Ezekiel 20, and we'll start in verse 5. Say to them, thus says the Master YHWH, on the day when I chose Israel, and raised my hand in an oath to the descendants of the house of Jacob, and made myself known to them. In the land of Egypt I raised my hand in an oath to them, saying, I am YHWH your mighty one. On that day I raised my hand to them in an oath, to bring them out of the land of Egypt, to a land that I had searched out for them, flowing with milk and honey, the glory of all lands. Then I said to them, each of you, throw away the abominations which are before his eyes. Do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am YHWH your mighty one. But they rebelled against me, and would not obey me. They did not cast away the abominations which were before their eyes, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. Then I said, I will pour out my fury on them. I will fulfill my anger against them in the midst of the land of Egypt. But I acted for my name's sake, that I should not be profaned before the Gentiles among whom they were, in whose sight I made myself known to them, to bring them out of the land of Egypt. Therefore I made them go out of the land of Egypt, and brought them out into the wilderness. And I gave them my statutes, showed them my judgments, which, if a man does, he shall live by them. Moreover, I also gave them my Sabbaths, to be a sign between them and me, that they might know that I am the YHWH who sanctifies them. Yet the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my statutes and despised my judgments, which if a man does, he shall live by them. And they greatly defiled my Sabbaths. Then I said I would pour out my fury on them in the wilderness to consume them. But I acted for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned before the Gentiles, in whose sight I had brought them out. So I also raised my hand in an oath to them in the wilderness, that I would not bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, the glory of all lands, because they despised my judgments and did not walk in my statutes, but profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. Nevertheless, my eye spared them from destruction. I did not make an end to them in the wilderness, but I said to their children in the wilderness, do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, nor observe the judgments, nor defile yourselves with their idols. I am YHWH your mighty one. Walk in my statutes. Keep my judgments and do them. Hallow my Sabbaths, and they will be a sign between me and you, and that you may know that I am YHWH your mighty one. Notwithstanding the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my statutes, and were not careful to observe my judgments, which if a man does, he shall live by them. But they profaned my Sabbaths. Then I said I would pour out my fury on them, fulfill my anger against them in the wilderness. Nevertheless, I withdrew my hand and acted for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the Gentiles, in whose sight I had brought them out. Also I raised my hand in an oath to those in the wilderness, that I would scatter them among the Gentiles and disperse them throughout the countries, because they had not executed my judgments, but had despised my statutes, profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were fixed on their fathers' idols. Therefore I gave them up to statutes that were not good, and judgments by which they could not live. And I pronounced them unclean because of their ritual gifts, and that they caused all their firstborn to pass through the fire, that I might make them desolate, and that they might know that I am YHWH. So in verse 5 it tells us this. Thus says YHWH your mighty one, on the day when I chose Israel, and raised my hand in an oath to the descendants of the house of Jacob, and made myself known to them in the land of Egypt, I raised my hand in an oath to them, saying, I, YHWH your mighty one. So here we see the relationship between YHWH and his people is so important to him. He has taken an oath, and we know from Scripture there is nothing higher in the universe. He has taken an oath on himself, on his own life, on his own existence, that he is the mighty one of Israel. There is nothing higher in the universe that he can place this oath against. So the relationship between YHWH and Israel is based on the oath that YHWH took on himself. It is irrefutable, it is irrevocable, it is eternal, and YHWH will not change. He will do exactly what he's always promised to do for us if we do our part. And it says he chose Israel with a raised hand and an oath, and he chose to be our mighty one, but we have to do our part. And this is the issue. We do not do our part. We believe we know better. We believe that the way of the pagans, we believe the way of our fathers is better than the way that YHWH has told us. And people, there's so much deceit, so much deception. People now say, well, the Torah, the law, is a burden. It was done away with. It's a stumbling block. But when you look at what Yehovah himself tells us, if we look at verse 11, it says, "And I gave them my statutes, and showed them my judgments, which if a man do, he shall even live in them." If we do what Yehovah tells us to do, we shall live. If we follow the desires of our heart, if we follow what our parents taught us, if we follow Jewish traditions, if we follow man-made doctrine, we shall stumble and fall. But if we follow the commandments, the Torah, the statutes that Yehovah gave us, and apply them correctly, then we shall live, even in the time of the end, even through the tribulation. If we are faithful to him, we are close to him, and we follow his statutes and his judgments, he will be faithful to us and protect us through the time of the end. So he said he brought us out of the land of Egypt. Let's look at the importance of that statement. Let's turn back again to the book of Exodus. This time we'll go to Exodus chapter 12, and we'll start in verse 1. Now Yehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th of this month, every man shall take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbour next to his house take it according to the number of the persons. According to each man's need you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts, and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. Then they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw nor boiled at all in water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its entrails. You shall let none of it remain until morning, and what remains of it until morning you shall burn with fire. And thus you shall eat it, with a belt on your waist, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand. So you shall eat it in haste. It is Yehovah's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and will strike all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am Yehovah. Now the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. So this day shall be to you a memorial, and you shall keep it as a feast to Yehovah throughout your generations. You shall keep it as a feast by an everlasting ordinance. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. On the first day there shall be a set-apart convocation, and on the 7th day there shall be a set-apart convocation for you. No manner of work shall be done on them, but that which every one must eat, that only may be prepared by you. So you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on the same day I will have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations, as an everlasting ordinance. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread, until the 21st day of the month at evening. For 7 days no leaven shall be found in your houses. Since whoever eats what is leavened, that same person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is a stranger or a native in the land. You shall eat nothing leavened. In all your dwellings you shall eat unleavened bread. So in verse 17 we're told this, And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore ye shall observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. So those of us who are called by his name are required to observe the feast of unleavened bread. So again, this is an expansion of Torah, this is an expansion of the commandments. the Sabbath commandment requires us to keep these observances. This is part of the annual Sabbath, and we are to keep it forever throughout our generations. So we see here that Yehovah is telling us he brought us out of the land of Egypt, and we are to remember that forever. We are not to forget who is our mighty one, who is the one who protects us, who is the one who provides for us, who is the one who brought us out. We need to understand this is his will for us, and we need to remember him and what he's done for us forever throughout our generations. Now, as I said, everything is covenantal. It's a two-way street. So what happens if we don't? Well, let's turn forward to the prophet Jeremiah, and let us understand what Jeremiah tells us if we do not keep these observances and covenants. Let's go to Jeremiah 11, and we'll start in verse 1. The word that came to Jeremiah from Yehovah, saying, Hear the words of this covenant, and speak to the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and say to them, Thus says Yehovah, mighty one of Israel, Cursed is the man who does not obey the words of this covenant, which I commanded your fathers in the day I brought them out of the land of Egypt, from the iron furnace, saying, Obey my voice, and do according to all that I command you. So shall you be my people, and I will be your mighty one, that I may establish the oath which I have sworn to your fathers, to give them a land flowing with milk and honey, as it is this day. And I answered and said, So be it, Yehovah. Then Yehovah said to me, Proclaim all these words in the cities of Judah, and in the streets of Jerusalem, saying, Hear the words of this covenant, and do them. For I earnestly exhorted your fathers in the day I brought them up out of the land of Egypt, until this day, rising early and exhorting, saying, Obey my voice. Yet they did not obey, or incline their ear, but every one followed the dictates of his evil heart. Therefore I will bring upon them all the words of this covenant which I commanded them to do, but which they have not done. And Yehovah said to me, A conspiracy has been found among the men of Judah, and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They have turned back to the iniquities of their forefathers, who refused to hear my words, and they have gone after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken my covenant, which I made with their fathers. Therefore, thus says Yehovah, Behold, I will surely bring calamity on them, which they will not be able to escape. And though they cry out to me, I will not listen to them. Then the cities of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem will go out and cry out to the gods to whom they offer incense, but they will not save them at all in their time of trouble. For according to the number of your cities were your gods, O Judah, according to the number of the streets of Jerusalem, you have set up altars to that shameful thing, altars to burn incense to Baal. So in verse 3, Yehovah tells us this, And say thou unto them, Thus saith Yehovah, mighty one of Israel, Cursed is the man that obeyeth not the words of this covenant. So we see that just as Yehovah took an oath by himself to be our mighty one, for us to be his people, if we break the covenant, if we do not obey the covenantal relationship, we bring a curse upon ourselves. And in verse 11 it says this, Therefore thus saith Yehovah, Behold, I will bring evil upon them, and they shall not be able to escape. And though they shall cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them. If we break the covenant, if we put other gods before Yehovah, He will pay attention to us, but not for blessing, not to bring us to a land flowing with milk and honey. He will pay attention to us for evil. He will bring evil upon us as individuals. He will bring evil upon us as families, and he will bring evil upon us as a nation. And if we turn away from him and go after other gods, the wrath of Yehovah will come down on this people. That is what he says in his covenant. So, let us continue forward. He said he brought us out of Egypt. out of the house of bondage. Now, what does that mean? There's a lot of misunderstanding in mainstream Christian society about being free from bondage. So let's turn forward to the book of Romans and let us understand what this means. Romans chapter 8, and we'll start in verse 1. There is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Messiah YHWH, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Messiah YHWH has made me free from the law of sin and death. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, the Mighty One did by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh. On account of sin, he condemned sin in the flesh, that the righteous requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against the Mighty One, for it is not subject to the law of the Mighty One, nor indeed can be. So then, those who are in the flesh cannot please the Mighty One. But you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of the Mighty One dwells in you. Now if anyone does not have the Spirit of Messiah, he is not his. And if Messiah is in you, the body is dead because of sin, and the Spirit is life because of righteousness. But if the Spirit of him who raised YHWH from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Messiah from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his Spirit who dwells in you. Therefore, brethren, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For as many as are led by the Spirit of the Mighty One, these are the sons of the Mighty One. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the Spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit, that we are the children of the Mighty One. And if children, then heirs, heirs of the Mighty One, and joint heirs with Messiah, if indeed we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. So some people try to make the argument that the bondage that we have been freed from is the law and the commandments and the Torah. But this is not true. We read earlier, if we do his statutes, they bring us to life, they give us life. The bondage that we were under was our carnal nature. That is the bondage that we are freed from. And it says in verse 15, For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but ye have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. So the spirit that we receive at our baptism is the spirit of adoption. It frees us from our carnal nature. It frees us from the sins of the flesh and allows us to come into this relationship with YHWH to fulfill our ultimate destiny, which is to become children of the Mighty One. And Paul here, as he wrote to Romans, in verse 3 he says this, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. Now some say that Paul was the theologian of the New Testament. Paul clarified that the law was done away with, but in verse 3 he says, the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us. Paul nowhere in his writings said the law, the Torah, is done away. He said the bondage of the law, the penalty of the law, the Jewish traditions are done away with, but our relationship with YHWH is based on observance of Torah. It is based on having that relationship with him. And if we walk according to the law, we are not of the flesh but of the Spirit. And if we are of the Spirit, we are sons of adoption, not sons of fear and bondage. So we need to understand we are to come into his presence with the Torah in our heart, just as YHWH taught us. But let's not take it too far. It is common in human nature to go from one extreme to another. So let's look at the book of Galatians and understand how we are to have discernment and how we are to apply the law and the Torah in our lives. Galatians 5, and we'll start in verse 1. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Messiah has made us free, and do not be entangled again with a yoke of bondage. Indeed, I, Paul, say to you that if you become circumcised, Messiah will profit you nothing. And I testify again to every man who becomes circumcised, he is a debtor to keep the whole law. You have become estranged from Messiah, you who attempted to be justified by law, for you have fallen from grace. For we, through the Spirit, eagerly wait for the hope of the righteousness by faith. For in Messiah YHWH, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision avails anything, but faith working through love. You ran well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion does not come from him who calls you. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. I have confidence in you, in the Master, that you will have no other mind. But he who troubles you shall bear his judgment, whoever he is. And I, brethren, if I still preach circumcision, why do I still suffer persecution? Then the offence of the staff of the stake has been ceased. I wish that those who trouble you would even cut themselves off. For you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Only not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this: you shall love your neighbour as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, beware, lest you be consumed by one another. So what does Paul say? He is not saying the law is done away with. He is saying we should not go back into Judaic or to Jewish tradition. In verse 3 it says, For I testify again to every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to do the whole law. So he's saying, if you are a Gentile called into the faith, you do not need to be circumcised. You do not need to obey the Jewish traditions. You do not need to obey all the sacrificial requirements that were given through the statutes. You need to repent, be baptized, and bring the commandments into your heart. Then you are acceptable in Israel. And in verse 13 he gives us this warning: For brethren, you have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. The liberty which we have been brought into in Yahushua is freedom from the Jewish tradition. It is freedom from the mechanical process of the law. But that freedom comes from the fact that the law is in our hearts. We do not do it under duress. We do it because we want to do it. We understand the purpose of the law, and we understand the fulfillment of the law. And this is why we want to do these things. But many people use the writings of Paul to say the law was done away, we don't need to do this, we just need to have happy thoughts and meet Jesus at the bus stop, and then once saved, always saved. That is false doctrine. That is not what the Torah says, it is not what the Bible says, and it's what Paul is warning us against here. Do not use this liberty as an occasion for the flesh. So we're told that we shall have no other gods. How well have we done at upholding that? Well, let's see how seriously YHWH takes this position. Let's turn back to 2 Chronicles. We'll go to 2 Chronicles chapter 7 and we'll start in verse 12. 2 Chronicles 7 starting in verse 12. Then YHWH appeared to Solomon by night and said to him, I have heard your prayer, and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. When I shut up heaven and there is no rain, or command the locust to devour the land, or send pestilence among my people, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to prayer made in this place. For now I have chosen and sanctified this house, that my name may be there forever, and my eyes and my heart will be there perpetually. As for you, if you walk before me as your father David walked, and do according to all that I have commanded you, if you keep my statutes and my judgments, then I will establish the throne of your kingdom, as I covenanted with David your father, saying, you shall not fail to have a man as ruler in Israel. But if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I have set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will uproot them from my land which I have given them. And this house which I have sanctified for my name I will cast out of my sight, and will make it a proverb and a byword among all nations. And as for this house which is exalted, everyone who passes by it will be astonished and say, why has Jehovah done this to this land and to this house? Then they will answer, because they forsook Jehovah, mighty one of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and embraced other gods, and worshipped them and served them. Therefore he has brought all this calamity on them. So in verses 19 and 20, Solomon was told this, but if ye turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I have set before you, and shall go and serve other gods, and worship them, then I will pluck them up by the roots out of my land which I have given them. And this house which I have sanctified for my name will I cast out of my sight, and I will make it a proverb and a byword among all nations. So brethren, just as Jehovah plucked Israel out of the land because they had gone into paganism, they'd gone after the religions of the people around them, Jehovah divorced Israel and took Israel into the Assyrian captivity, pulled them out of the land. Subsequent to that, he took Judah and took them into the Babylonian captivity, plucked them out the land. Eventually he allowed some of the Jews to return to rebuild and repair Jerusalem and re-establish Jerusalem. But as the descendants of Israel, as his people, if we continue to go after false gods, he will pluck us out of this land. And the prophecies are clear. When the wrath of Jehovah comes upon his people, he will lay waste this land. He will destroy America and Britain. He will sweep it clean. He will take all the people out of this land. And we need to understand the false gods of our age are not necessarily Baal or Chemosh or Molech, although they are there in many guises. The false gods of this land are money and greed and gluttony and lust. The churches are almost becoming irrelevant in this society, but our carnal nature has become the false god to which the vast majority of these people, the American people, the British people, the descendants of Israel, have gone after their own carnal nature, their own lusts, and Jehovah will pluck us out of this land in wrath because we have gone after other gods apart from him. Now let's look how this continued in the tribe of Judah. Let's turn forward to Jeremiah, and let's go to Jeremiah chapter 44 and see how this manifested in Judah. Jeremiah 44, starting in verse 1. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the Jews who dwell in the land of Egypt, who dwell at Migdol, in Taphanes, at Noph, and in the country of Pathros, saying, Thus says Jehovah of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, You have seen all the calamity that I have brought on Jerusalem, and on all the cities of Judah. And behold, this day they are a desolation, and no one dwells in them, because of their wickedness, which they have committed to provoke me to anger, in that they went to burn incense and serve other gods whom they did not know, they nor you nor your fathers. However, I have sent you my servants the prophets, rising early, and sending them, saying, Oh, do not do this abominable thing that I hate. But they did not listen, or incline their ear to turn from their wickedness, to burn no incense to other gods. So my fury and my anger were poured out, and kindled in the cities of Judah, and in the streets of Jerusalem, and they are wasted and desolate as it is to this day. Now therefore, thus says Jehovah, the mighty one of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, why do you commit this great evil against yourselves, to cut off from you man and woman, child and infant, out of Judah, leaving no one to remain, in that you provoke me to wrath with the works of your hands, burning incense to other gods in the land of Egypt, where you have gone to dwell, that you may cut yourselves off, and be a curse and a reproach among all the nations of the earth? Have you forgotten the wickedness of your fathers, the wickedness of the kings of Judah, the wickedness of their wives, your own wickedness, and the wickedness of your wives, which they committed in the land of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? They have not been humble to this day, nor have they feared. They have not walked in my law or in my statutes, that I set before you and your fathers. Therefore, thus says the Master of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, behold, I will set my face against you for catastrophe, and for cutting off all Judah. And I will take the remnant of Judah who have set their faces to go into the land of Egypt to dwell there, and they shall be consumed and fall in the land of Egypt. They shall be consumed by the sword and by famine. They shall die from the least to the greatest, by the sword and by famine. And they shall be an oath, an astonishment, a curse, and a reproach. For I will punish those who dwell in the land of Egypt, as I have punished Jerusalem, by the sword, by famine, and by pestilence. So none of the remnant of Judah, who have gone into the land of Egypt to dwell there, shall escape or survive, lest they return to the land of Judah, to which they desire to return and dwell. For none shall escape except those who none shall return except those who escape. Then all the men who knew that their wives had burned incense to other gods, with all the women who stood by, a great multitude, and all the people who dwelt in the land of Egypt at Pathros, answered Jeremiah, saying, As for the word that you have spoken to us in the name of Jehovah, we will not listen to you. But we will certainly do whatever has gone out of our own mouth, to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven and pour out drink offerings to her, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings and our princes in the cities of Judah, and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then we had plenty of food, were well off, and saw no trouble. But since we stopped burning incense to the Queen of Heaven, and pouring out drink offerings to her, we have lacked everything, and have been consumed by the sword and by famine. The women also said, And when we burned incense to the Queen of Heaven, and poured out drink offerings to her, did we make cakes for her, to worship her, and pour out drink offerings to her, without our husband's permission? Then Jeremiah spoke to all the people, the men, the women, and all the people who had given him that answer, saying, The incense that you burned in the cities of Judah, in the streets of Jerusalem, you and your fathers, your kings, your princes, and the people of the land, did not Jehovah remember them? And did it not come into his mind? So Jehovah could no longer bear it because of the evil of your doings, and because of the abominations which you committed. Therefore your land is a desolation, an astonishment, a curse, and without an inhabitant, as it is this day, because you have burned incense, and because you have sinned against Jehovah, and have not obeyed the voice of Jehovah, or walked in his law, or in his statutes, or in his testimonies. Therefore this calamity has happened to you, as at this day. Moreover, Jeremiah said to all the people and to the women, Hear the word of Jehovah, all Judah who are in the land of Egypt. Thus says Jehovah of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, saying, You and your wives have spoken with your mouths, and fulfilled with your hands, saying, We will surely keep our vows that we have made, to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and pour out drink offerings to her. You will surely keep your vows, and perform your vows. Therefore, hear the word of Jehovah, all Judah who dwell in the land of Egypt. Behold, I have sworn by my great name, says Jehovah, that my name shall no more be named in the mouth of any man of Judah in the land of Egypt, saying, The Master Jehovah lives. Behold, I will watch over them for adversity, and not for good. And all the men of Judah who are in the land of Egypt shall be consumed by the sword and by famine until there is no end to them. Yet a small number who escape the sword shall return from the land of Egypt to the land of Judah, and all the remnant of Judah who have gone to the land of Egypt to dwell there shall know those words will stand, mine or theirs. And this shall be a sign to you, says Jehovah, that I will punish you in this place, that you may know that my words will surely stand against you for adversity. Thus says Jehovah, behold, I will give Pharaoh Hophra, king of Egypt, into the hand of his enemies, and into the hands of those who seek his life, as I gave Zedekiah, king of Judah, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, his enemy who sought his life. So what did Jeremiah say? In verse 18, the people admitted their own guilt. It says, and when we burned incense to the Queen of Heaven, and poured out drink offerings unto her, did we make cakes to worship her, and pour out drink offerings unto her, without our men? Here is a clear admission of guilt by the women of Judah, implicating their husbands, their men. And we see this guilt perpetuated in the Christian church today. The Roman Catholic Church venerate Mary, Queen of Heaven, as high as, if not higher than, YHWH himself. They pour out their drink offerings to her. And this concept here, did we make cakes to worship her? They're called raisin cakes. This is what we see in our society today around the time of Easter in the form of hot cross buns. These are the raisin cakes of the pagans, and this is a continuation of this pagan worship. And in verse 22, YHWH says this, so that YHWH could no longer bear, because of the evil of your doings, and because of the abominations which ye have committed. Therefore is your land a desolation and an astonishment and a curse, without an inhabitant as this day. So here we have the second witness. Jeremiah is saying, if we continue to defile the commandments of YHWH, he will sweep our land clean. He will take us away. He will pluck us up from this land. He will destroy everything in this land and sweep it clean. It will be a desolation, an astonishment, a curse, and without inhabitant. And that, brethren, will come upon this people if we do not repent and turn back to Torah and turn back to what YHWH taught his people and entered into a covenant with us. And this must be one of the most scary verses in the Bible. Verse 27. Behold, I will watch over them for evil and not for good. And all the men of Judah that are in the land of Egypt shall be consumed by the sword and by famine, until there be an end to them. Just as we saw in Chronicles, YHWH is telling us through Jeremiah, he will look out for us, but he will look out for us for destruction, for despair, for to be consumed by the sword and by famine, and to make an end to us. So brethren, we are told, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. If we do not obey the Torah, if we do not obey the commandments and the statutes, YHWH will look out for this people, but for destruction and not for good. So let's look at what the prophet Hosea tells us here. Let's go to Hosea chapter 3, and we'll start in verse 1. Then YHWH said to me, go again, love a woman who is loved by a lover, and is committing adultery, just like the love of YHWH for the children of Israel, who look to other gods, and love the raisin cakes of the pagans. So I brought for myself for 15 shekels of silver, and 1.5 homers of barley. And I said to her, you shall stay with me many days, you shall not play the harlot, nor shall you have a man. So too will I be toward you. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, without ephod or teraphim. Afterward the children of Israel shall return and seek YHWH their mighty one, and David their king. They shall fear YHWH and his goodness in the latter days. So again we see this reference to the raisin cakes and to the hot cross buns which are given out in our society. But in verse 5 we see this first glimmer of hope. Afterward shall the children of Israel return and seek Yahweh their mighty one, and David their king, and shall fear Yahweh and his goodness in the latter days. Brethren, after the tribulation falls upon this people, Yahweh will call his children back. We will come to him and he will look out for us. But this is in the latter days. Before that time, we have to go into destruction. We have to go into captivity. The descendants of Israel will be destroyed before they come to repentance and come to seek Yahweh their mighty one. So what do we need to do? Those of us that claim to be called by his name, those of us who have been baptized, who have repented of our carnal nature, who have received the set-apart Spirit, what do we need to do? Well, let's turn forward just a couple of pages to the prophet Joel. And we'll go to Joel chapter 2, and we'll start in verse 18. Then Yahweh will be zealous for his land and pity his people. Yahweh will answer and say to his people, Behold, I will send you grain and new wine and oil, and you'll be satisfied by them. I will no longer make you a reproach among the nations, but I will remove far from you the northern army, and I will drive him away into a barren and desolate land, with his face towards the eastern sea and his back towards the western sea. His stench will come up, and his foul odour will rise, because he has done monstrous things. Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for Yahweh has done marvellous things. Do not be afraid, you beasts of the field, for the open pastures are springing up, and the tree bears its fruit. The fig tree and the vine yield their strength. Be glad then, you children of Zion, and rejoice in Yahweh your mighty one, for he has given you the former rain faithfully, and he will cause the rain to come down for you, the former rain and the latter rain in the first month. The threshing floors shall be full of wheat, and the vat shall overflow with new wine and oil. So I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the crawling locust, the consuming locust, the chewing locust, my great army which I sent among you. You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of Yahweh your mighty one, who has dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never be put to shame. Then you shall know that I am in the midst of Israel. I am Yahweh your mighty one, and there is no other. My people shall never be put to shame. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. And also on my men servants and on my maid servants I will pour out my spirit in those days. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness, the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and awesome day of Yahweh. And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of Yahweh shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be deliverance, as Yahweh has said, among the remnant whom Yahweh calls. So in verse 18 we're given this sense of hope. Then Yahweh will be zealous for his land and pity his people. There will come upon us a time of destruction. We have turned away from him. We have accepted other gods. We've put many false gods before us, between us and Yahweh. So his wrath will be upon this people. He will wash away this land. He will bring this people to destruction. But there then comes a time in the latter days when he will look upon us with pity. In verse 18 it says, Yahweh will be zealous for his land and pity his people. And in verse 27 we're told, And ye shall know that I am the midst of Israel, that I am Yahweh your mighty one, and none else, and my people shall never be ashamed. So there is hope, brethren. Now we have a choice to make. We can choose to obey the first commandment now, and avoid the punishment, avoid the cursing, and receive the blessing that is given us, or we can choose to go our own way, to follow our own gods, to worship the way we feel it's appropriate. But his wrath will be upon us, his punishment will sweep us away from this land, and we will go through the tribulation, until the time of the latter days. The choice is ours, and it's a choice that every one of us needs to make. But let's look at what he wants to see in his people in the time of the end. Let's close this study by going through to the book of Hebrews. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 8, and we'll start in verse 7. Hebrews 8, starting in verse 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then no place would have been sought for a second. Because finding fault with them, he said, Behold, the days are coming, says Jehovah, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant which I made with their fathers in the days when I took them in by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they did not continue in my covenant, and I disregarded them, says Jehovah. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Jehovah. I will put my laws in their mind, and write them on their hearts. I will be their mighty one, and they shall be my people. None of them shall teach his neighbour, and none his brother, saying, Know Jehovah. For all shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their lawless deeds I will remember no more. In that he says, a new covenant. He has made the first obsolete. Now what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. So let's look at what it says here in verse 10. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith Jehovah. I will put my laws into their mind, and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a mighty one, and they shall be to me a people. After the tribulation, when Jehovah finally has pity on us, he will pour out the Ruach HaKodesh. His law will come into us. We will do his will because we desire to do his will, not through coercion or fear. That is the end state. That is the love that Jehovah has for his people. But we can have that now if we choose to obey the first commandment. And let's look at one point here. In verse 8 it says, Because finding fault with them, he says, Behold, the days are coming, says Jehovah, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel. The fault was not with the law. The fault was not with the commandments. The fault was with us, because we did not keep them. So we have a choice. We can obey the commandments now. We can choose to obey this first commandment. We can choose to receive the blessing that that brings. Or we can choose to stay in rebellion, go into tribulation, be killed by famine, pestilence, and the sword, be swept from the land, and only after he has pity on us, after he has decimated this people, then he will write his law in our hearts. So, brethren, doesn't it make sense to obey his law now, to choose to obey the first commandment, and to put Jehovah first, and put away the false gods from our lives? It's your choice. But as for me and my house, we will serve Jehovah. Amen.